My fiancée got pregnant by my younger brother, and my parents threw them an engagement party. I showed up with one envelope nobody expected. Ella told me she was pregnant on a Tuesday night while I was eating leftover pasta straight out of the container. I remember that because for about 5 seconds, I thought it was good news. We'd been engaged for 8 months, together for almost 4 years. We weren't actively trying for a baby, but we'd talked about having kids after the wedding. So when she sat across from me at the kitchen table and said, "Grant, I'm pregnant," my first reaction was basically shock followed by this stupid grin. Seriously? She didn't smile back. That was when I put the fork down. Ella had been weird for a couple of months by then. Distant is probably the easiest way to describe it. She'd started staying later at work, taking her phone into the bathroom, and finding reasons to spend weekends away from the house. I noticed. Of course I noticed. But we'd also been planning a wedding, and her job had gotten busier, so I kept telling myself I was reading too much into it. Looking back, that was probably denial. Anyway, I asked how far along she was. She stared at the table. Ella, when? Almost 11 weeks. I did the math automatically. Then I noticed she was crying. Not happy crying either. I just sat there looking at her. What's wrong? She wiped her face and said, "I need you to let me explain everything before you react." Yeah, nothing good has ever followed that sentence. I leaned back in my chair. Explain what? She took forever to answer. There's a possibility you're not the father. I honestly thought I'd misunderstood her. What? She repeated it. I asked who else could possibly be the father. She wouldn't answer. Ella, who? More silence. Then she said, very quietly, Corbin. My younger brother. I stared at her for several seconds because I genuinely couldn't figure out what question to ask first. Corbin? Of all people? How long? It wasn't supposed to happen. That wasn't my question. She started explaining that they'd gotten close because Corbin had been helping with some wedding stuff while I was busy. Apparently they started talking more. Then there was some argument between Ella and me that I barely even remembered, and she went to Corbin because he understood. I stopped her. How long? She finally looked at me. A few months. That answer told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't one drunken mistake. So you've been sleeping with my brother for months? It wasn't like that. I actually laughed. Not because anything was funny. I just couldn't believe she'd said it. What exactly was it like? She started crying harder. I wasn't interested. I asked whether Corbin knew about the pregnancy. Yes. Does he think it's his? Another pause. Yes. That was probably the moment the engagement ended for me. Not emotionally. I think that part was still catching up. Practically. I took off my ring and put it on the table. Ella looked at it. Grant, please, we're done. You haven't even let me explain. You slept with my brother for months. You're pregnant. He thinks it's his. Which part needs clarification? She told me I was being cold. Maybe I was. But I'd spent most of my life cleaning up after Corbin, and suddenly a lot of things started connecting in my head. Corbin was 4 years younger than me and had always been the one everyone worried about, which meant I was the one everyone relied on. When we were teenagers and he backed Dad's truck into a fence, somehow I spent the weekend helping repair it because I was more responsible. When he dropped out of college after barely making it through his first year, Dad found him work. When he blew through his savings a few years later, Mom called me. Not Corbin, me. She asked if I could loan him $18,000 because he was going through a difficult period. I did. That was the pattern. Corbin created the problem. Everyone else discussed how Grant could help solve it. And apparently he'd graduated from borrowing my money to sleeping with my fiancée. Ella kept trying to talk. I told her she needed to stay somewhere else. She asked where she was supposed to go. I don't know. You're seriously kicking me out? You have Corbin's number. That shut her up. She packed a bag. Not everything. Just enough for a few days. Before leaving, she stood by the door and asked if we could talk once I'd calmed down. I told her there wasn't anything left to discuss. Then she left. I sat at that kitchen table for maybe 20 minutes afterward. I don't remember exactly. Eventually I picked up my phone. Despite everything, there was still one stupid thought in my head. My parents might favor Corbin. They might excuse his screw-ups. But there was no possible way they could defend this. At least that's what I thought. I called Mom first. She answered on the third ring. Hey, honey, everything okay? No. My voice must have sounded different because she immediately got serious. What happened? Ella pregnant. There was a pause. Then Mom actually sounded excited. Oh my God, Grant, it's Corbin's. Nothing. For several seconds, I couldn't even hear her breathing. Then she said something I wasn't expecting. Grant, before you do anything, your father and I already know. I sat up. What? And that was when I realized this night wasn't even close to being over. What do you mean you already know? Mom didn't answer right away. I stood up from the kitchen table without really knowing why and walked over to the window. Ella's car was gone. Mom, Corbin called us earlier. Earlier when? This afternoon. That stopped me. Ella had told me around 7. I looked at the clock on the microwave. It was a little after 8. So Corbin told you before Ella told me? He was scared. I actually pulled the phone away from my ear and stared at it. Of course he was scared. Somehow we were already discussing Corbin's feelings. I put the phone back. What exactly did he tell you? That there was something going on between them. And that Ella was pregnant. Something going on? Grant, please don't make me repeat everything. No. I'd really like you to repeat it. She sighed. That annoyed me more than anything. My younger brother had been sleeping with my fiancée, and somehow I was already exhausting everyone by asking questions. Your father and I don't approve, she said. Good to know. Don't be sarcastic. I'm not sure what response you're looking for. Another pause. Then Mom said, there's a baby involved now. We have to think about the future. I remember staring out the window when she said that. Not because it was some devastating sentence. Mostly because I was trying to figure out what the hell it meant. Whose future? Mine apparently wasn't included. What exactly are you asking me to do? I'm asking you not to make any decisions while you're angry. Ella, when and I are finished. Grant. What? You found out an hour ago. And? You've been together almost 4 years. I laughed. Yeah, that's generally why sleeping with my brother is a problem. She got quiet. Then Dad's voice came through faintly in the background. A second later Mom said, your father wants to talk to you. Of course he did. Dad got on the phone. Son, I hated when he opened conversations like that. Usually it meant I was about to be asked for something. I don't really feel like having a family meeting tonight. I'm not asking for one. Great. I just want you to think before you do something you can't take back. I leaned against the counter. Interesting choice of words. You know what I mean? I actually don't. Dad exhaled. What's happened can't be undone. There it was. I should probably explain something about my father. Dad wasn't the type to openly defend Corbin when Corbin screwed up. He did something more irritating. He became practical. Corbin totaled a car? Well, yelling wouldn't repair it. Corbin quit college? Well, forcing him back wouldn't accomplish anything. Corbin needed money? Well, letting him fail wouldn't help anyone. There was always some extremely reasonable explanation for why everybody needed to move past whatever Corbin had done. Apparently sleeping with my fiancée was getting the same treatment. So what's your solution? I asked. I don't have one. Sounds like you do. I think everybody needs a few days. No, Grant. No. Ella, when and I are done. That's not changing. Dad's voice hardened slightly. Don't destroy the family over something that can't be undone. That one actually made me laugh. I'm destroying the family? That's not what I said. Pretty close. You're twisting my words. Corbin slept with my fiancée for months. I know. She is pregnant with his child. I know. And your concern is that I might destroy the family? Dad didn't answer. That was enough for me. I've got to go. Grant. I hung up. Maybe that was rude. I didn't care. About 20 minutes later, Corbin called. I almost ignored it. Then I decided I wanted to hear what he had to say. Hey. His voice sounded nervous. Hey, I don't know how to start this. Try the beginning. He went quiet. Then came the apology. He was sorry. He never wanted this. He hadn't planned it. Things between him and Ella Wen had gotten complicated. Apparently they'd started talking because she'd been stressed about the wedding. Then one conversation became several. Then they'd crossed a line. That phrase stuck out to me. Crossed a line. Like they'd accidentally wandered across a property boundary. How long? A while. How long? Corbin? I don't know. A few months. Interesting. Same answer Ella Wen gave me. Then he said, I never wanted you to find out like this. I stopped pacing. Like what? What? You said you never wanted me to find out like this. I just meant, so how did you want me to find out? That's not what I meant. But you did expect me to find out eventually. He started stumbling over his words. I wasn't interested anymore. Good luck, Corbin. Wait. I hung up. The next few days were surprisingly quiet. Ella Wen texted me several times asking when she could collect the rest of her things. I gave her a time when I'd be out and told her to leave her key. Corbin didn't contact me again. Mom did. Mostly little messages. Please don't shut everyone out. We love you. Your brother knows he made a terrible mistake. I didn't respond. Then, 6 days after Ella Wen left, Mom called. She sounded weirdly upbeat. I wanted you to hear this from us before somebody else tells you. That sentence was becoming another one I didn't enjoy hearing. What? She hesitated. Corbin proposed to Ella Wen. I rubbed my forehead. Okay. And she said yes. Okay. Mom seemed confused by my reaction. Then she continued. Your father and I thought, considering everything, it might be nice to do something positive. We're hosting a small engagement party. I actually checked whether she'd said engagement party. She had. For Corbin and Ella Wen? Obviously. I laughed. Apparently it wasn't going to be that small either. Close to 40 people. Relatives, family, friends, some people Corbin worked with. Then Mom said the part that finally made everything click. We'd really like you there. I think it would show everyone that we're moving forward as a family. Moving forward. Right. I looked across my kitchen toward the small desk where I kept paperwork for my businesses. For the first time since Ella Wen told me the truth, I wasn't angry. I was thinking. Because there was something Corbin had apparently forgotten. Something Mom and Dad probably hadn't thought about either. His business wasn't entirely his. Not even close. Grant? Mom said. Are you still there? Yeah. So you'll think about coming? I kept looking at that desk. Then I smiled. Sure, Mom. Because my younger brother owns 60% of his company, and I own the other 40. I ended the call with Mom and sat there looking at the desk for another minute. Then I opened the bottom drawer. I keep physical copies of important agreements even though everything is backed up digitally. Dad makes fun of me for it. Corbin definitely does. That suddenly seemed pretty funny. I found the folder I wanted and carried it to the kitchen table. Corbin's company had started about 3 years earlier. Dad had been the reason I got involved. 5 years ago, his construction company lost 2 major contracts within a few months of each other. One client went under halfway through a project, and another canceled before work started. Dad had already committed money to equipment and subcontractors. He wasn't broke, but he had a serious cash problem. At the time, my own business was doing well. I won't pretend I was some millionaire throwing money around, because I wasn't. I had just been careful. I kept debt low, reinvested profits, and didn't buy things simply because I could afford the monthly payment. Dad came to me. He needed help restructuring some outstanding debt. I agreed, but I didn't just write him a check. I had an attorney set everything up properly through an LLC. Dad thought that was excessive. I thought handing family large amounts of money without paperwork was stupid. Considering recent events, I'll let you decide who had the better instinct. Dad recovered. A couple of years later, Corbin announced he wanted to start building custom homes. He had experience by then because Dad had basically trained him from the ground up. The problem was Corbin didn't have much capital. Guess who got called? Dad invited me over one Sunday and spent an hour explaining why Corbin finally had direction. I still remember him saying, this could be the thing that gets him settled. Corbin was 26. Apparently we were still waiting for him to get settled. I agreed to help, but again, I wasn't handing over cash based on a handshake. My company provided several pieces of equipment Corbin would have otherwise needed to lease. I helped guarantee the warehouse he used for storage and administrative space. There was some startup capital too. In exchange, my company received 40% ownership. Corbin got 60% in operational control. Honestly, I thought it was fair, probably generous. I wasn't involved in his day-to-day work. I didn't tell him which projects to accept or who to hire. Most months I barely thought about the company unless paperwork came across my desk. Corbin liked telling people he'd built the business himself. I never corrected him. At the time, I didn't care. Sitting at my kitchen table that night, I cared enough to start reading. And here's the thing. I wasn't looking for some magical paragraph that said, if your brother sleeps with your fiancée, take his company. Obviously, I wanted to know exactly what I was still obligated to provide and what I wasn't. The next morning, I called my attorney, Malcolm. He'd handled most of the original agreements. I need you to review something. What happened? I won out of several arrangements connected to Corbin's company. There was a pause. Everything okay? No. He didn't ask for details. One thing I like about Malcolm is that he doesn't turn business conversations into therapy sessions. We met that afternoon. I brought the agreements even though he already had copies. For almost 2 hours, we went through everything. The equipment was straightforward. Several major pieces Corbin regularly used were still owned outright by my company. His business had use of them under an operating agreement. The warehouse was even more interesting. My guarantee wasn't permanent. It expired in a little over 2 months. Corbin would need to qualify independently after that or find another guarantor. Then Malcolm started showing me expenses I'd forgotten about. Insurance, maintenance, a few administrative costs, small individually, not small together. My company had been absorbing a surprising amount because, frankly, I'd never bothered squeezing Corbin for every dollar. He knows you're covering this? Malcolm asked. He should. That wasn't my question. I thought about it. I honestly don't know. Malcolm gave me a look. Then we got to the ownership agreement. There was a buyout provision connected to conduct that materially endangered the company or damaged its commercial reputation. I pointed at it. Can we use that? Possibly. Possibly isn't yes. No, it isn't. He explained that we needed to document everything properly. Corbin's personal behavior alone wasn't automatically enough. If there were business consequences, conflicts involving clients, misuse of company resources, or reputational exposure, that changed things. Fair enough. I wasn't interested in bluffing. What can I definitely do? Malcolm started listing things. End voluntary subsidies. Prepare notice regarding the equipment. Decline to renew the warehouse guarantee. Enforce every reimbursement obligation exactly as written. And begin the formal process of examining whether the buyout provision applied. I nodded. Do all of it. He looked at me. Grant, once some of these notices go out, walking them back gets complicated. Good. That was apparently enough explanation. Over the next week, I gave Malcolm every document he requested. Meanwhile, my family apparently thought I was healing. Mom texted me restaurant details, then parking information, then asked whether I had any dietary restrictions, which was almost impressive considering she hadn't asked how I was doing. Corbin didn't contact me. Neither did Elowen. Fine by me. 3 days before the party, Malcolm called. Everything's ready. All of it? The notices we discussed are finalized. I've also included the supporting documents. Read them before you sign anything. I will. And Grant? Yeah? Once Corbin receives these, he's going to understand very quickly how much you've actually been providing. I looked at the engagement party invitation sitting on my counter. That's kind of the point. The documents arrived by courier the next morning. I read every page. Twice. Then I signed where Malcolm had marked. Mom texted me that afternoon. We're really happy you're coming. I think this will mean a lot to your brother. I stared at that message for a while. Then I went into my office, found a plain cream envelope, and slid the documents inside. No card, no congratulations, nothing else, just paperwork. I sealed it and wrote Corbin's name across the front. For the first time in my life, my brother was about to find out exactly what independence cost. And apparently, I was going to give it to him as an engagement present. The party was Saturday evening at a restaurant about 20 minutes from my place. I got there 15 minutes late, not intentionally. Parking was terrible. I mentioned that because Mom later accused me of deliberately making an entrance, which gives me way more theatrical ability than I actually have. I walked in carrying the envelope under my arm. The private room was bigger than I'd expected. Mom had called this a small family thing. There were nearly 40 people there. Aunts, uncles, cousins, family friends, several people I recognized from Dad's company, and a few of Corbin's business contacts. Apparently adultery really brings people together. Elowen was wearing white. Not a wedding dress or anything ridiculous. Just a white fitted dress I'd seen her wear once before. She noticed me almost immediately. Her expression changed. Corbin was standing beside her talking to one of Dad's friends. When Elowen touched his arm, he turned and saw me too. Neither of them came over. Mom did. She crossed the room with this enormous relieved smile and hugged me before I could stop her. You came. I said I would. I know. I just wasn't sure. Then she leaned back and looked at me. I knew you'd come around. That almost got me. I actually had to bite the inside of my cheek. Come around. Like I'd been throwing a tantrum because somebody ate my leftovers. Yeah, I said. Well, here I am. Mom noticed the envelope. What's that? Something for Corbin. Her entire face brightened. Oh, Grant. She squeezed my arm. That means more than you know. I'm sure it did. I got myself a drink and stood near one of my cousins for a while. Nobody really knew how to talk to me. A few people avoided mentioning Elowen entirely. One uncle asked how work was going and stayed on that topic for an impressively long time. Then there were the people who clearly didn't know the whole story. One of Mom's friends congratulated me on being such a supportive brother. I just said, thanks. There was no point explaining anything. Eventually Corbin approached me. Elowen stayed several feet behind him. Hey. He shoved his hands into his pockets. Thanks for coming. Sure. He looked at the envelope. Mom must have told him. Is that for us? For you. Something about that made him nervous. Good instincts. Finally, before he could ask anything else, Dad called everyone together because apparently we were doing speeches. People grabbed their drinks. I stayed near the back. Dad stood beside Corbin and Elowen and raised his glass. His speech lasted maybe 3 minutes. I don't remember every word. I remember certain parts. He talked about unexpected turns in life. He talked about mistakes. Then he said family wasn't about judging people by their worst decisions. That one got several approving nods. Dad continued. We support each other through difficult circumstances. I looked at Corbin. He wouldn't look at me. Neither would Elowen. Interesting. Nobody actually said what the difficult circumstances were. Nobody said Corbin slept with his brother's fiancée. Nobody said Elowen cheated. They'd turned the whole thing into some vague hardship that had simply happened to everybody. Corbin thanked Mom and Dad afterward. Then he thanked everyone for supporting him and Elowen. There was applause. I took a drink. Mom found me almost immediately. See what? This can work. I looked at her. What can work? She lowered her voice. All of us moving forward. There were about 10 different things I could have said. Instead, I handed her my empty glass. Can you hold this? She looked confused but took it. I walked toward Corbin. People were still gathered around him, so I waited until the conversation died down. Then I held out the envelope. Congratulations. Corbin looked surprised. Elowen looked terrified. He took it. You didn't have to get us anything. I know. Mom had followed me over. She was smiling again. Open it. Corbin glanced at me. I shrugged. Go ahead. He tore the envelope open. At first he smiled. Then he pulled out the papers. I watched his eyes move across the first page. His smile slowly disappeared. He flipped to the second. Then the third. What is this? Read it. I am reading it. Apparently not very well. The first document formally notified him that my company was beginning the contractual process related to my ownership interest. The second ended his company's use of several pieces of equipment owned by mine, subject to the notice period in our agreement. The third was simpler. I would not be renewing my guarantee on the warehouse when it expired in 60 days. Corbin looked at me. You're serious? Completely. His voice got louder. You can't just do this. A few conversations nearby stopped. I checked. I said, I can. This is my company. 60% of it is. Dad had noticed something was wrong by then. He came over. What happened? Corbin shoved the papers toward him. Ask Grant. Dad took them. Mom was reading over his shoulder. Elowen finally spoke. Grant, is this really necessary? I looked at her. Yes. Corbin pointed at the paperwork. You're trying to destroy my business because you're pissed about Elowen. No, I'm stopping my support of your business. Same thing. That was probably the most revealing thing he could have said. Dad had stopped listening to us. He was reading, really reading. He flipped back to the equipment notice, then to the warehouse guarantee. I watched his expression change. Unlike Corbin, Dad understood contracts. More importantly, he knew enough about Corbin's finances to understand what those papers actually meant. He looked up at me. Grant, what? We need to discuss this privately. No, We don't. His jaw tightened. You don't understand what this is going to do. I almost laughed. I understand exactly what it's going to do. Mom stepped closer. Do what? Dad didn't answer her. He kept staring at the documents. Then he looked at Corbin. How much cash do you have available right now? Corbin frowned. What? In the business? Available cash. How much? I don't know exactly. Dad's face went pale. And that was when Corbin finally stopped looking angry. For the first time all evening, my brother looked scared. Corbin looked at Dad like he'd asked him to recite his bank account number from memory. I said I don't know exactly. Dad lowered the papers. Ballpark. Why does that matter? Because I'm asking. That was unusual. Dad rarely spoke to Corbin that way. Corbin glanced around and seemed to remember we had an audience. Can we not do this here? Interesting. 5 minutes earlier, he'd been perfectly comfortable celebrating his engagement in front of everyone. Now privacy mattered. Dad looked at me again. Grant, give us a week. No. A few days. Then. No. Corbin snapped. Would you stop saying no like some kind of robot? I looked at him. Would that change the answer? Elowen touched his arm. Corbin. He pulled away from her. This is insane. Mom finally took the documents from Dad and started reading them herself. She got maybe halfway through the equipment notice before looking at me. You're taking his equipment? My equipment. He uses it for work. I know. How is he supposed to finish his projects? That sounds like something the majority owner should figure out. Mom stared at me. You're really going to ruin your own brother because of Elowen? There it was. I knew we'd eventually get there. No. Then what do you call this? I call it not supporting him anymore. That's the same thing. No. It isn't. Apparently nobody liked that answer. Corbin started talking about employees. Elowen brought up the baby. Mom brought up family. Dad mostly stayed quiet. I think he understood there was a difference, even if he didn't like it. Corbin pointed at me. You know I can't replace all that equipment on short notice. I know. So you're deliberately screwing me. No. I'm letting you pay for the things your business uses. He laughed bitterly. You've got an answer for everything tonight. I had 3 weeks. That shut him up. Elowen stepped forward. This isn't just about Corbin anymore. I looked at her. Okay. We're having a child. I'm aware. So whatever you're doing affects our baby too. I honestly didn't know what she expected me to say. You want me to financially support the child you're having with my brother? Her face changed. I didn't say that. You kind of did. No. I'm saying you don't have to make things harder intentionally. I nodded toward the papers. Nothing in there belongs to you. She went quiet. Mom jumped in. Grant. Nobody is saying what they did was right. That irritated me enough that I finally said what I'd been thinking all night. Has anybody apologized? Nobody answered. I looked at Corbin. You? He stared at me. Then Elowen. Nothing. Mom started with, that's not fair. It was a yes or no question. Dad rubbed his forehead. This isn't helping. I'm not trying to help. That came out harsher than I'd intended, but it was true. For years, helping had basically been my assigned role. I looked at Corbin. You've spent years telling everyone this business is yours. Dad tells everyone how successful you are. Mom tells everyone how proud she is that you built something for yourself. Corbin crossed his arms. I did. Great. I nodded toward the documents. Then run it yourself. Mom said my name. I ignored her. You own 60%. You control operations. You've got clients. You've got employees. You've got experience. Corbin didn't say anything. You've spent 30 years being told how capable you are. I'm finally giving you the opportunity to prove it. His face went red. I didn't stick around after that. There wasn't anything else to accomplish. I said goodbye to an uncle who'd been pretending not to listen from about 6 feet away, collected my jacket, and left. My phone started vibrating before I reached home. Mom, then Corbin, then Dad. I put it on silent. Monday morning, Malcolm confirmed receipt of everything and reminded me not to discuss the legal details directly with Corbin. Fine by me. For about 2 weeks, nothing dramatic happened. Then the equipment return date started approaching. Corbin tried negotiating extensions through Malcolm. Denied. He tried offering reduced rental payments. Also denied. Eventually the equipment came back. Not all at once. A trailer first. Then 2 larger pieces over the following week. That's when his problem stopped being theoretical. One project fell behind. Then another. Corbin had to rent replacement equipment at commercial rates, and apparently he hadn't realized what those rates actually were. He called me late one evening. You know what this is costing me? Yes. You're enjoying this. No, I wasn't. Actually, that's probably what annoyed him most. I wasn't sitting around celebrating. I was working. He was finally paying his own expenses. About 4 weeks after the party, Dad came to my office. He closed the door behind him. Corbin's bank wants additional collateral. I leaned back. Okay, they know your warehouse guarantee is expiring. Makes sense. He can't qualify for the same arrangement alone. I waited. Dad looked uncomfortable. Then he said, I can cover it. There it was. Of course he could. Or at least he thought he could. How? Dad hesitated. I've got retirement funds. Your mother and I have enough set aside. I stared at him. Does Mom know? He didn't answer. That was answer enough. Apparently Dad was planning to rescue Corbin again. Except this time, the money he intended to risk wasn't his alone. And judging by the look on his face, Mom had absolutely no idea. Dad, That's not just your money. He shifted in the chair. I know. Then why are you sitting here telling me you can use it? I didn't say I'm definitely doing anything. You came to my office to tell me you can cover Corbin's collateral with your retirement account. Our retirement account. Exactly. Dad rubbed the side of his face. He looked tired. Not engagement party tired. Actually tired. I'm trying to keep his company alive. I understand. And you don't care? I didn't say that. You're certainly acting like it. I leaned forward. What do you want from me? He didn't answer immediately. That was becoming a family tradition. Finally he said, extend the warehouse guarantee another year. No. 6 months. No. Grant, I'm not asking you to give him money. You're asking me to guarantee an obligation he can't qualify for himself. He needs time. He's always needed time. Dad looked annoyed. This isn't about what happened when he was 20. No, it's about what's happening now. I wasn't going to argue about Corbin's childhood. That wasn't the point. Dad stood up. I hope you understand what you're doing. I do. He left. Apparently he went home and told Mom. I know that because she called me less than 2 hours later. What did your father say to you? About what? The retirement money. So she'd found out. I told her exactly what Dad had told me. Mom went quiet. Then she asked, how much does Corbin need? I don't know. You're part owner. That doesn't mean I know what Dad offered him. She lowered her voice. He wants to put up part of our retirement account. I know. Why would he do that? I almost said, you know exactly why. Instead I said, ask him. Apparently she did. The next few days were messy. Mom called twice. Dad called once. Corbin called enough that I eventually muted him. From what I could piece together, Mom had absolutely no intention of risking a large portion of their retirement savings on Corbin's business. Dad insisted it wasn't that risky. Mom asked why the bank wouldn't accept the business itself as enough security if it wasn't risky. I wasn't there for that conversation, but I would have paid decent money to see Dad answer. Then Mom did something I hadn't expected. She brought up the $18,000. You already helped him before, she told me over the phone. I actually laughed. Interesting that you remember that now. What does that mean? It means when I loaned him the money, you called it helping family. He paid you back. Eventually. It took Corbin almost 3 years. I hadn't cared at the time. Now Mom suddenly seemed to remember exactly how unreliable he'd been. Funny how quickly someone's financial habits become concerning when it's your retirement account instead of somebody else's money. About a week later, Corbin called from a number I didn't recognize. I answered because I thought it was a client. Seriously? I said when I heard his voice. You blocked me. Muted. Same thing. Not really. He skipped the apology this time. He told me one of his projects had fallen further behind because the replacement equipment wasn't available when he needed it. Another client was threatening penalties. Then he said, I just need you to stop this for 90 days. No. 3 months. Grant. No. Why? I almost laughed. You really need me to explain why? You're destroying something I spent 3 years building. There it was again. His business, his work, his accomplishment, my responsibility. You still own your company. On paper, that caught my attention. What does that mean? You know what it means. Without your equipment and the warehouse, I interrupted him. Then apparently I was contributing more than you liked admitting. He went quiet. Then he said, you're enjoying watching me fail. No, Corbin, I'm just not preventing it anymore. He hung up. A few days after that, Elowin called. I almost didn't answer. Curiosity won. Grant. What? She sounded exhausted. You need to stop. Stop what? This. Very specific. You're destroying everyone. I leaned back in my chair. I haven't spoken to you in weeks. You know what I mean. Actually, I don't. Corbin barely sleeps. Your parents are fighting constantly. Warren is talking about putting their retirement money into the business. Darlene is blaming me. Everyone is miserable. I waited. And? She sounded genuinely offended. And you caused it. No. Yes. You did. No. I stopped supporting everyone. Silence. There's a difference. She started saying something about the baby again. I ended the call. After that, things went quiet for almost 2 weeks. Not completely. There were emails through Malcolm, business notices, routine paperwork. But personally, nobody contacted me. I figured maybe everyone had finally realized I wasn't changing my mind. Then, one Thursday morning, my receptionist called my office. Your father's here. Does he have an appointment? No. I looked at the time. It wasn't even 10. Send him in. Dad walked through my door a minute later. I barely recognized the version of him standing there. His shirt was wrinkled. He hadn't shaved properly. He looked like he hadn't slept. And in his hand was a familiar cream envelope. The same one I'd given Corbin at the engagement party. Dad closed the door. He didn't sit. He placed the envelope on my desk. Then he said, your brother finally told us why Elowin was spending so much time with him before you found out. I stared at him. What are you talking about? Dad reached inside his jacket. He pulled out another document and placed it beside the envelope. There's something you need to see. I looked down. At first, nothing stood out. Then I noticed the date printed across the top. And suddenly, I wasn't thinking about Corbin's business anymore. It was a copy of a subcontractor agreement. Corbin's company name was at the top, along with the name of a cabinet supplier he'd used on several projects. I looked at Dad. What am I supposed to be seeing? The date. I see the date. It was from almost 7 months earlier. That put it roughly 4 months before Ella told me she was pregnant. I still didn't understand. Then Dad pointed toward the bottom of the page. Ella prepared it. I looked again. There was her name, not as a party to the agreement. She'd apparently helped Corbin put the paperwork together and had emailed the final version to the supplier. I leaned back. Ella helped him with paperwork? Dad nodded. For months. That didn't make sense. Ella had never mentioned doing anything for Corbin's business. Not once. What does this have to do with them sleeping together? Dad finally sat down. Corbin says that's how it started. I stared at him. Apparently Corbin had gotten overwhelmed after taking on several projects at once. He was terrible with paperwork, which wasn't exactly news. Ella had started helping him occasionally. At first, supposedly, it was innocent. A contract here, an invoice there. Then she started going to his office after work. Dad said Corbin admitted she'd sometimes stay for hours. I immediately remembered several nights. Ella telling me she was working late. Ella saying she was meeting one of her friends. One Saturday when she disappeared for half the afternoon because she supposedly had errands. At the time, none of it had seemed unusual enough to investigate. Now I felt stupid. Not because I'd trusted her. I don't think trusting the person you're supposed to marry makes you stupid. But there were things I'd ignored. How long were they actually together? Dad looked down. Corbin says the physical part started about 5 months before you found out. I laughed once. A few months. What? That's what they both told me. A few months. Apparently 5 qualified. I looked at the document again. So why do you have this? Your mother found it. That confused me even more. Where? Corbin's office. Mom had gone there 2 days earlier because Corbin and Dad were arguing about the business. While she was there, she found a folder containing paperwork Ella had prepared. Not one document. A lot of them. Some went back even further. Dad had brought this one because it was the earliest dated document they could verify. Why would Mom care who prepared his subcontractor agreements? She didn't. At first. There was something about the way he said that. At first? Dad rubbed both hands over his face. Then he looked at me. Corbin told us the truth last night. Which truth? That Ella wasn't just helping him. No kidding. Grant. What? He hesitated. Again. I was getting really tired of watching my father hesitate before saying things about my own life. Just say it. Dad looked toward the office door even though it was closed. He says they were already emotionally involved by then. I tapped the date. 7 months ago? Yes. That meant the affair hadn't begun with one bad decision. They'd built toward it. Meetings, messages, private conversations, hours together I knew nothing about. And somehow that bothered me more than I'd expected. I could understand a stupid impulse. I couldn't understand maintaining a second relationship while sitting across from me discussing wedding invitations. Then another memory came back. A family barbecue around 6 months earlier. Corbin had known we'd changed caterers. I remembered because he'd made some joke about how much I was paying per person. I'd asked how he knew. He said Mom told him. I never thought about it again. Mom hadn't known yet. Ella had. I looked at Dad. Did you know she was helping him? He didn't answer. There it was. That same hesitation. My stomach tightened. Dad, I knew she had helped him with some paperwork. When? A while ago. How long is a while? He looked uncomfortable. Before you found out. I stared at him. How far before? I don't remember exactly. Try. He leaned back. I saw her at Corbin's office once. When? Maybe 6 months ago. 6 months. I stopped moving. You saw my fiancée at my brother's office 6 months ago? She said she was helping him. At night? It wasn't that late. That wasn't an answer. And you didn't think that was strange? Dad's expression hardened slightly. Not at the time. Really? Grant, I had no reason to assume. I'm not asking whether you knew they were sleeping together. He stopped. I pointed at the document. I'm asking whether you thought something was off. Dad looked away. That was enough. I stood up. What did you notice? Nothing specific. Then why are you looking at the floor? He didn't like that. For several seconds neither of us said anything. Finally Dad said, your mother made a comment once. What comment? She thought Ella and Corbin had gotten unusually close. I felt something click into place. When? Dad didn't answer immediately. I already knew I wasn't going to like it. Before the office? He nodded. So both of you noticed? We didn't know anything. That's not what I asked. Dad stood. We thought Corbin finally had someone helping him stay organized. Ella was going to be family. Your mother thought maybe she was just trying to help. But she thought they were unusually close. Yes, and you ignored it. Dad's jaw tightened. We didn't have proof of anything. I laughed. Of course, because that was exactly how my family worked. If confronting Corbin might create a problem, everybody waited until the problem became impossible to ignore. Dad picked up the cream envelope. I should have said something. That was the first sentence he'd said since this started that sounded remotely like accountability. But there was still something bothering me. You said Corbin finally told you why Ella was spending so much time with him. Yes. Why did he tell you now? Dad's expression changed. That was when I realized the document wasn't actually the reason he'd come. He slowly sat back down. Because he and Ella had a fight last night. About what? Dad looked at me. Then he said, about when the relationship really started. I frowned. You just told me. No. He shook his head. I told you when Corbin says it became physical. I didn't say anything. Dad reached back into his jacket. There was another folded piece of paper inside. He put it on my desk but kept his hand over it. Grant, there's something else Corbin admitted last night. I looked at his hand. What? Dad swallowed. Then he slid the paper toward me, and when I unfolded it, I realized the date wasn't the worst part. It was who else had known. It was a printed email. I recognized Elowen's address immediately. The recipient was Corbin. The date was almost 8 months old. But that wasn't what made me stop. Dad had been copied on it. I looked up. You were on this? Yes. The email itself wasn't romantic. Nothing remotely incriminating. Elowen was sending Corbin revised paperwork for one of his projects. She mentioned they'd discussed it earlier and told him she'd finish another document that weekend. Dad had replied underneath. Thanks for helping him with this, Elowen. Corbin needs someone organized around him. I read that sentence twice. Then I put the paper down. You knew she was doing this regularly. I knew she was helping him. That's not what you told me 5 minutes ago. I didn't understand how involved she'd become. I stared at him. Mom thought they were unusually close. You saw her at his office. You were getting emails showing she was doing work for him outside her own job. Dad looked irritated now. Probably because admitting one mistake is easier than admitting a pattern. We didn't know they were having an affair. I know. I need you to understand that. I do. And I did. I didn't think my parents had knowingly covered up the affair. That would have been easier, honestly. What they'd done was more familiar. They'd noticed something strange involving Corbin and decided not to examine it too closely. Because examining Corbin's behavior had always created problems. Ignoring it was easier. Until it wasn't. Dad looked at the papers. Your mother feels terrible. Okay. That's all you have to say? What would you like me to say? He didn't have an answer. I asked what Corbin had actually admitted. Apparently the emotional relationship had started around 8 months before I found out. The physical affair began several months later. Elowen had been helping him with paperwork, then staying afterward to talk. Corbin claimed he was having problems with the business. Elowen claimed she was having doubts about our relationship. Very convenient arrangement. Two people complaining about their lives until eventually they decided the problem was me. The argument the night before happened because Elowen had discovered Corbin had told Dad she pursued him first. She said he pursued her. Corbin said she was rewriting history. At some point, apparently, they started yelling about dates. That's how Dad learned how far back everything actually went. I almost laughed. Their relationship had started with lying to me and was now deteriorating because they couldn't agree on which one of them was more responsible for the lie. Seems stable. Dad folded his hands. Grant, I'm sorry. I looked at him. He continued. I should have said something when your mother mentioned it. Yes, that answer surprised him. Maybe he expected me to tell him it was okay. It wasn't. I should have asked questions. Yes, he nodded slowly. For once, there wasn't an argument. Then he got to the real reason he'd come. Corbin's in serious trouble. Of course, there it was. Dad explained that another project was now delayed. The warehouse issue still wasn't resolved. Corbin had managed to find temporary equipment, but the costs were eating into what little margin he had left. Dad and Mom had agreed they weren't touching their retirement accounts. That part surprised me. Mom won? Dad almost smiled. No, she was right. That might have been the most growth I'd seen from him in years. Then he asked whether I'd reconsider anything. No, not angrily. Just no. Even knowing all this? Especially knowing all this. Dad looked disappointed. But he didn't argue. I explained something I probably should have explained years earlier. I wasn't taking Corbin's money. I wasn't contacting his customers. I wasn't sabotaging projects. I wasn't preventing him from operating. Everything legally belonging to him remained his. Everything legally belonging to me was coming back to me, and everything I'd voluntarily been providing was finished. If his company only survives because I keep rescuing it, I said, then it isn't my job to pretend he's independent. Dad nodded. He left about 10 minutes later. The next few months were quieter. Corbin didn't lose everything overnight. Real life usually isn't that dramatic. He downsized. He gave up the warehouse and moved into a smaller space. He reduced staff. He started renting equipment only when projects required it. From what Dad eventually told me, Corbin survived, just at a much smaller level. Elowen stayed with him, at least as far as I know. I stopped asking. Mom called me once and said she hated that the family would never be the same. I told her, that's probably the first thing we've agreed on. She didn't appreciate that, but it was true. I kept my ownership interests protected, recovered what belonged to my company, and stopped mixing family obligations with business decisions. Nobody got another loan. Nobody got another guarantee. Nobody got another quiet subsidy because they were going through a difficult period. The strangest part is that I wasn't angry anymore. For years, my parents called me the responsible one. I used to think responsibility meant being the person who fixed everything. Turns out that's only half of it. Sometimes being responsible means recognizing a problem isn't yours to fix. Corbin had his business. Elowen had her decision. My parents had the consequences of protecting him for 30 years. And I had my life back. For once, nobody needed Grant to clean up the mess. And if they did, they were finally going to have to learn how to live without him. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you really like our videos, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Have a great day.